Hey everybody out there, you're tuned in to 91.8 The Fan. You're in my corner and I have a very special guest in the corner. Would you like to unveil your secret identity?
This is 91.8, The Fan. And who am I, Jackie? I'm not sure. It could be a number of people. Flint on G.I. Joe or Danilo Dina, or it's actually Bill Ratner. That's who I am. In reality, that's what my mother would want me to say.
Well, I hope your mother is listening because you just did right
She
by her.
could be, depending on where in the cosmos she has been for all these decades. Yeah.
But no, I'm so happy to have you on the show. We had a lot of fans who were super excited, because it's interesting with cartoon and anime fans, there really is no age limit on it. And, you've done a voice that's very nostalgic for people.
Well, it's funny. My friend Mary McDonald Lewis is a voiceover lady who you actually oddly hear on Cymbalta. I think it's like a tranquilizer. It's a national spot. She makes so much money saying Cymbalta. She was the voice of Lady J, who was the love interest of Flint on G.I. Joe. And this is, decades ago. And I never got comprehended the issue of fandom, fanboys and fangirls, for Transformers and G.I. Joe, particularly the animation, the animated movies and the TV series. Until really only a couple of years ago, we got a call from Hasbro's G.I. Joe Con, which is now in its 50th year, believe it or not.
Wow.
And because they were selling GI Joe dolls, action figures years and years ago before the animated series. And I said, well, what do they want? And she said, well, they want to pay us money to come to Indianapolis to GI Joe Con. And I said, and do what? And she said, well, we'll see. So that was the first time, literally 30 some years after the series aired for 2 years on syndicated broadcast television, that I met fans of GI Joe and Transformers. And I lumped them both together because they're both done at the same time. They're both Hasbro franchises. They're both done by Sunbow Productions, and they utilized a lot of the same voices. And there was a crossover between some of the G.I. Joe team characters into Transformers. So since then, it's been incredible fun. This weekend coming up, we are at Long Beach Comic-Con for the G.I. Joe Voices panel. Lady J and Flint and Storm Shadow and a few others, and Wally Burr, who has directed the original episodes. So, but not only that, they keep bringing this stuff back. My agent got a call a couple of years ago from the people at Family Guy. Seth MacFarlane said, is the guy who did the voice of Flint on G.I. Joe still alive? And she goes, yes, that's Bill Ratner, and we represent him. And he and I actually got together on the phone and recorded my voice for the premiere episode when Family Guy went from CBS to Fox. And then Community, which was on NBC, they wanted to do a whole episode with a nightmare about the lead actor being in a G.I. Joe nightmare. So it keeps coming back from the grave, Jackie. What can I say?
Well, I think it's very interesting too because you never know what's going to happen because there's not a consistent show airing right now. So you just get a call and you're like, I'm going to be Flint, but I have no idea in what situation.
Right, exactly. And I keep doing other stuff. Mass Effect's been a cool game. It's in its third iteration, and I play kind of a nasty politician named Danilo Udina who has no allegiance whatsoever to anyone and will screw just about any politician to the wall for the price of a bag of peanuts.
Yeah, I got mad at you a few times playing that game.
Yeah, really. And in Grand Theft Auto, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, their billion-dollar franchise, I got to be one of the voices on the radio. You have to steal a car, turn on the radio, and there I'll be doing some snarky radio commercial. But at least I'm there. So it's been fun. And mix that with TV promos. Tonight, Rockstar rolls over his fans in a limo. Then blah 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 blah. That's what I do a lot of these days. But I just got word from my agent that I'm going to do a couple of voices on a new Japanese anime series that, of course, has been animated fully and already broadcast in Tokyo, but is coming over here and will be dubbed by me and a bunch of other American voice actors and coming to a desktop near you.
Very exciting. Now, for the fans out there, one thing I have to ask, because they like knowing the differences between animation and video games. So, for you, what is the biggest difference you notice when you're recording, say, an American Western animation that isn't done yet in a video game that might have pictures and might not?
For me, it's really more geographical than it is performance because um, and there's one other difference as well. If I get a call from Nickelodeon to audition or Disney to audition, I'm assuming, maybe wrongly, but still assuming that it's going to be kind of a silly or kind of a crazy, cartoony type voice for a broadcast cartoon. However, for a game, the game makers, Rockstar and etc., are really looking for more reality. They're looking for more of a naturalistic acting from their characters. And of course, there are some that are really out there and crazy and wild, voice wise. But that's what makes it interesting is that when you get called in to do a game session of voice work, you're given three characters to play. And they don't want it so cartoony often. They want it real. These are characters, they may be a billion miles away in another galaxy, but they still have some semblance of humanity. And so that's what occurs to me to answer your questions, what the difference is between a traditional Disney or Nickelodeon broadcast cartoon and a computer game is the computer game voice acting just might be a little subtler, a little more naturalistic in some cases.
Well, I think a lot of that too has to do with the medium because video games are supposed to be very immersive and they want people to get really into the story. Not that you can't do that with Western animation, but because there's an interactive concept to it, aspect to it, people just, that's their main focus.
Right. And the very interactivity makes it very intimate. And you're sitting there with whatever digital device you're using. You're very close to those characters. You feel in close proximity to them. And there was a screening at the American Cinematheque in Hollywood at the Egyptian Theater not so many months ago of the animated Transformers movie and the animated G.I. Joe movie, which the G.I. Joe movie had actually never been seen in theatrical release. It was released on DVD for reasons that were very strange. One of the characters was killed in the movie, and the people at Hasbro said, we can't have him dead. We've got a whole TV season to do. So anyway, that movie had not been seen. I'd never seen it, and a bunch of us went and served on a panel. And this is the early 80s, but the quality of the voice work, not the technical quality, but the acting quality was very sort of strange. It was all yelling and crazy. And if you were to do that kind of cartoony acting in a computer game, I think it would turn off the users, the players. And so I think that's why the game makers finally got hip to the fact that the audiences are sophisticated, whether young or old, and their relationship with characters, good or bad, likable or not, is going to be quite intimate. And if you're confronting or standing next to or about to meet a character that's in close proximity to you, you don't want him. You probably shouldn't be yelling, screaming, and acting like a Smurf.
Well, I do like that you mentioned the technological aspect as well, because voiceover has seen such a drastic change with the way just with technology. I mean, you've got so many different entrances into voiceover now, and now you can just switch everything with Pro Tools if you need to.
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that's happened, and not so much in the game business, because in the game business they still want us to come to Technicolor or a particular kind of studio that's dedicated to the sophisticated modes of recording that they use. They really are looking to create a high quality recording, and not everybody's $5,000 voiceover studio in their basement or their garage is going to match the technical quality and bandwidth that they're looking to get for a game, for the final product, as it goes through lots of iterations and dubbing and duplicating and so on. So we still go to a studio to do a game voice or a cartoon voice, or a dubbing session for something that's imported from Tokyo. Um, but yeah, in terms of a lot of voiceover work, it's done in people's basements. I mean, I sit in my basement these days. It's a little lonely here. We used to go out and be in studios all the time, from movie trailers to TV networks to advertising agencies to cartoon companies, etc. We would be fighting the traffic and always late and showing up and eating their M&Ms and their cheddar cheese and crackers and drinking their coffee and going on to the next session. These days, most of us who work a lot are in our own studios. And as long as you have a decent microphone and a decent microphone preamp, you don't want a snowball mic with a USB plug that can tend to be kind of limited in bandwidth. But people are able to do quite a lot. But in the session that I'm going to do probably next week for the anime pieces that are coming out of Tokyo, I have to go to a studio, not because my studio sounds terrible, but they just want a uniform sound quality, and they want to be able to control it and hear it as it's going down, rather than hope and guess that it's going to be good coming out of your basement.
And for that too, I'm sure they want it to be matched to picture, and there's certain lip flaps that might need to be, adjusted, or a word might be changed, because dubbing is, kind of by the seat of your pants sometimes.
Yeah, dubbing is strange, especially with foreign languages, which are constructed totally different from English, whether it's a Romance language like French or Spanish or Italian, or a language like Japanese, contemporary Japanese. We might say, "Hey, take it easy," and in Japanese, it might take 16 syllables. So yeah, it's tricky. So between the actor and the director, are you going to say, take it easy? Or is it just going to be, hey, take it easy? So yeah, it's that in itself is an art, the art of dubbing. And I just went and saw Federico Fellini's Italian classic from post-war Europe, Eight and a Half. And in that era, when Hollywood had been doing sync sound for decades, the Italians and many of the Europeans were still doing, in movie making, traditional 35 millimeter movie making. They were dubbing everything. So the actors were dubbing their lines from Italian into Italian. And so when you see old European movies, if you go on Netflix or Google Movies, really the best, because Google Movies, you can go way back in time and see European classics. You will see acting slightly out of sync. It's kind of fascinating. You'll also see in modern anime with American actors doing the Japanese dubbing, but it's a weird art in itself.
Well, it's interesting too, because in Japan they actually still dub to picture, even for things that they make in Japan.
Which is very strange. They do that in American film and television, live action, only when the recording is bad.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't want to pay the actors to come back in. But if for some reason an air horn goes off when the actor's saying his dialogue, they got to bring him back in to replace it and to sync it. But the Americans like to get sync sound and get it done and get away from the actors and the agents who are gouging them for every penny they can. I'm
Well,
not talking about voiceover agents. I'm talking about celebrity actors.
yeah, I could see that. But well, it's interesting too, because anime is usually recorded with nobody else there. But in Japan, when they do it, sometimes they'll bring in some of the other characters, and they'll actually have a session more like you would see in traditional Western anime, or I'm sorry, animation, where they're not dubbing to picture. So it's just interesting how the two cultures do it differently.
It's interesting. I've been in Japan and spent some time, but I've never worked there, and so I can't really comment on their level of perfection that they're looking for. And they may very well have extremely high standards in terms of voice interpretation. These may be venerable characters that have been around for a long time that fans are going to notice variations in performance level, or in terp, or God forbid, an actor dies and they have to be replaced. Um, that may be an issue. And it's not that Americans don't have high standards, but it's a different culture, and I think that anime is deeply embedded into Japanese pop culture, and may very well be followed by a greater portion of the population than uh, the American counterpart here.
Definitely, but as you know, it's been proven with Flint. There's fans who grow up with a show, and then it means so much to them, even as they get on later in life.
It's really interesting, that phenomenon, because if I were able to meet the individuals who did the television shows and the animation, puppet shows, and so on that I watched, uh, I would be lining up, like every fanboy, fangirl in the world, with my action figures and my autograph book. I'd be doing exactly the same thing. But these were sort of primitive cartoons, Crusader Rabbit, and even live marionette shows like Fearless Fosdick. I actually, in a GI Joe session, met an individual who happened to be an older voice actor at the time, who had constructed Fearless Fosdick, the show that I saw when I was 5 years old. I nearly started crying when I realized this was the guy who had laid hands on cloth and paper and wood and fish line to create this marionette. And I believe he also had voiced it. The great Chuck McCann. Chuck McCann was a voice on GI Joe and lots of TV cartoons. And before that, when he was younger, he made puppets for American television. And here, a half a century later, I'm looking into the face of the guy who had created this puppet. And had I met the voice of Fearless Fosdick, I would have just, been floored. So I understand fandom. There's a deep emotional connection. I mean, if you're 5 to 14 years old and you're listening to voices that are sort of shaping your consciousness and shaping your, aesthetic vision of the universe, and then you come to meet them or listen to them again when you're older, there's a deep emotional resonance, and I understand it and have experienced it myself.
Well, glad to know that you're a geek just like all of us.
Yeah.
But for the fans out there, we're going to take a very short break, so make sure to keep it tuned to 91.8 The Fan. Our special guest isn't going anywhere, so don't worry. Hey, everybody out there, my special guest is still here, alive and breathing, I hope. Take.
I'm coughing because of the western fires in Northwest America.
Oh yeah, they're really bad right now, aren't they?
I was in Ashland, Oregon, where the Oregon Shakespeare Festival is, running much more than Shakespeare. I mean, these are actors. 85. They employ 85 actors, and and 750 individuals. They have like 3 theaters, big, huge outdoor, like Globe Theater, and then they do American plays and experimental stuff and so on. And the fires in Oregon and Washington were so big that you could smell, and it was screwing up people's voices. These actors were having to get on stage outside at night, audiences of 800 people paying $100 a ticket, and so. But I digress, Jackie.
Well, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, it's been really interesting for me because I was born and grew up in a desert. I've lived in Vegas my entire life. I've traveled a great ton, but I've lived in Vegas my entire life. And so there are some places I go to and I come back and my voice is just like, what was that? That was weather. I don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah, it is weird. It's weird to consider, unless you've actually seen a videotape or a photograph of what a set of vocal cords look like. it looks like it's this two tiny little delicate flaps of skin. But when you think about your voice, it's kind of like, well, just it's my voice in there. And it can, I realize that for me, I'm a coffeeholic. I love bold roast coffee. But if I drink too much of it, it affects my voice. It thins out my voice.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I'm the same way. Not in terms of coffee, but in terms of caffeinated beverages. I'm a Dr. Pepper fan, so I have to limit myself. Like I can only have Dr. Pepper after the sun has set,
yeah,
and and then it's the rest of the day. It's just water or tea or some Chinese herbal medicine.
I worked with a voiceover lady who was in her late 70s. This is many, many years ago, who June Foray, Foray, June Foray, who was one of the great cartoon voices in America in many, many cartoons. And this is a political spot or something. And this old woman comes in with this cute little cranberry suit, jacket and matching blouse and skirt and shoes and purse. And I thought, whose grandmother is this? Until she opened her mouth. And she sounded like a 18-year-old.
Oh
And
wow.
I was just, and needless to say, she probably didn't drink much and certainly didn't smoke. And thus her voice in her 70s sounded like a young woman's voice. And she also probably, had actors training and voice training and did what some of us do, which is voice warm-ups and do a few things in the morning to sort of, clear out the pipes as opposed to just staggering up to the microphone. So that was a real lesson to me. It was spooky when she opened her. I expected to hear this nice lady. Instead, it was the voice of a delicious sounding ingenue. And that moment taught me a lot about voice control and caring for your vocal cords.
I love hearing stories like that because there's some habits I definitely have to kick because I'm into spicy food and voiceover and radio usually don't mix.
I'm into spicy food. In fact, in the morning, I do a concoction of apple cider vinegar and lemon juice and cayenne pepper, red hot, and turmeric and cinnamon. I don't sweeten it, and mainly water, and drink it. And then I think I rinse my mouth out. Well, this is the medical portion of our show, Jackie. And gargle with a little bit of water just to sort of get it out of my mouth when I'm done. Tastes fine. But I don't find that spicy food is so bad unless you were to eat, like douse your taco with pico pica and then immediately open the mic. That might cause a problem. But really, dairy foods and coffee tend to be much worse on the voice if you're trying to get in front of a mic.
I mean, spicy food has its use for me because I feel like it kind of drains your sinuses.
Right.
So I feel like really refreshed 30 minutes later, where it's like, man, everything's cleaned out. Like it feels like. So, but at the same time, I've had people say that affects your voice, and everybody has different opinions on it, and everyone's voice is different. So.
So what happens at an anime conference? I've been to Long Beach Comic Con and GI Joe Con and so on, but I've never been to an anime conference. And if I get this gig, Jackie, I'm coming.
Well, that's good to know because I know some cons.
Yeah.
But when it comes right down to it, I think all conventions are the same in a sense that they're a celebration of the media that they're celebrating. But anime cons have generally a lot more diversity in terms of the medium because, with comics, for us, they're so recognizable. I could take my mom to a Comic-Con and she could go, that's Superman, that's Batman. She knows what that is. But if you take somebody to an anime con, they're not necessarily going to know who these people are dressed up as. And I think that's what makes the anime community a little bit more tight-knit.
Interesting.
But that's just my opinion.
Cool.
Everyone has different opinions at conventions. So I know that you have the Long Beach convention coming up. Do you have any others planned for the rest of the year?
Mary McDonough Lewis and she is played my love interest, Lady J in G.I. Joe. We just got signed by an agent that specializes in cartoon voices and setting them up in cons. So, but because G.I. Joe, is so out of the past, who knows what's going to happen? I don't know if there was talk of doing a G.I. Joe panel at Comic-Con at some point, but it's really up to the taste of the programmers. And at G.I. Joe Con, I noticed that it was mainly men between 28 and 48 years old. That's the demographic of people who were watching in the 80s at the time. And so it depends. If I get cast in a bunch of characters in this anime series coming up in this country, that may change things forever.
It's true. I mean, with anime cons, I feel like I get older and older, and the audience gets younger and younger.
Wow. So that's what's coming up. What else is coming up? I have a book out. I did Book Expo America in New York at the Javits Center a couple months ago. I did BookCon in New York. I sell a book called that was published by Familius Press in Sanger, California, called Parenting for the Digital Age: The Truth Behind Media's Effect on Children and What to Do About It. And there's a whole chapter on G.I. Joe and the merchandising of G.I. Joe and Transformers toys. A whole chapter on Barbie and the merchandising of Barbie, the creation of Barbie. And Barbie was originally this bizarre toy, looked exactly like what Barbie looks like, but was sold in bars by a German magazine because it was a promotional item and bought mainly by women for their boyfriends as a joke. And then the Mattel people bought the rights to produce it and change her clothes, and thus Barbie was born. So I decided to kind of delve into the history of merchandising of action figures and toys and games and so on, and ended up writing this book. I interviewed a bunch of kids. I interviewed a bunch of parents. What do you watch? What do you buy? What games do you play? And Parenting for the Digital Age by Bill Ratner, available now wherever fine books are sold. So that's been really fun. And I got many months later, I do you can do a Google alert on yourself. I don't Google myself very often, but when I do it in private. And you sign up for a Google alert, wherever your name appears on the internet. Although it takes a week, it's odd. They'll send you an alert. It's an automated alert saying your name appeared. I clicked on this link. About 5 months after this book was published, Time Magazine did an article about it. And I went, whoa, what if I hadn't answered my Google alert? And last week they emailed me and asked if I'd be willing to write about that horrible, horrible thing that happened in Roanoke, Virginia, where the guy ended up offing two of his colleagues at a TV station. And
Oh yeah, no, that
so
was.
I wrote a piece for them, and then I don't think they ran it because every single broadcast entity was doing opinion pieces on that. It was just I thought, a sort of a bizarre, pointless story of how weird can we get on Twitter and Facebook. But so it's been an adventure. When being a voice actor is the greatest job I could ever think of. Being an author is also cool, although the money's better in voice acting. But it's gotten me into interesting trouble. Am I going to go to LA Times Festival of Books next year? Maybe so. And then there's a new book I'll have coming out called Announcing the Apocalypse. These aren't, I don't self-publish because I don't want to. Announcing the Apocalypse is a book about voice acting and about the particular kind of jobs I get for Discovery ID, which are these tragedies. I'm going into my 8th season for I Almost Got Away with It. It was about bad guys on the lam. And air disasters and behind mansion walls.
Oh
And
gosh, those are my things. Whenever this is a story that I feel like I have to tell.
yeah, no,
Whenever we go to a con, everyone's like, "Oh, Jackie's watching her murder porn again," because every hotel has that channel, and I don't have
yeah.
it at home, and I just love watching it.
Well, it's weird. I was at a storytelling event in a bar in Venice, an organization called themoth.org, and the Moth Radio Hours on a bunch of NPR stations, and it's personal stories, true stories. And I've done a bunch of those. They're really fun. And a friend of mine was there, and he said, "Oh, hey, there's a friend of mine across the room, and he produces all this stuff for Discovery. I want to introduce you to him." And I went, "All right, okay." And so he introduced me, and the only words out of the guy's mouth from Discovery were, "I only use Peter Coyote." And I went, "Oh, okay, hey, no problem." Um, but so Peter Coyote gets all the sort of Americana stuff for PBS. When they want somebody to do the crime tragedies, call Bill Ratner. And it took me a long time to figure out, why am I the guy that gets that work? I'll actually be in the booth narrating an episode of air disasters, or I almost got away with it, and the stuff will be so tragic that I'll just start crying.
Oh,
I mean, this is like method announcing, right? They call it method acting. This is method announcing, and the producer who's on the phone will go, "Are you okay?" "Yeah, no, I'm yeah, I'm fine. Fine, Bob. Let's keep going. Let's keep plowing through the tragedy." And so that's one of the things I'm writing about now, which is the emotional and a connection for a performer between the kind of characters that they get cast as, which you don't really have a lot of choice over, and the kind of person you actually are, or what went to make the kind of voice actor that you are.
that
And
sounds really great. I'm sure a lot of fans who are into voiceover and, are looking at it as a career that they might want to pursue will be really interested in that.
well, check out billratner.com, billratner.com/author, or on Facebook you can find Bill Ratner, and I'll be posting portions of this book and pieces of it, and when it's ready next year, I'll put up the big news.
And you also have a Twitter as well.
At Bill Ratner, BILLRATNER, at Bill Ratner. And there's a bunch of fun stuff this week because of Long Beach Comic Con. They really did a cool job making graphics for each one of us, for Storm Shadow and for me and for Lady J. And so we're putting all that stuff up and inviting people to come on down.
Well, fantastic. Well, now the listeners know where to follow you whenever you have anything new pop up.
That's right.
And for the fans out there, since we're nearing the end of this interview, sadly, I have 3 basic questions, and you can choose to answer one or all of them. But do you have any words of wisdom, dating advice, or predictions for the end of the world for the listeners out there?
As far as the end of the world is concerned, ride it out like a surfboard. Keep your eyes open. Don't get high, because the end of the world will really get you high.
I like that. That was good. Now I just imagine like a Mad Max on a surfboard, like surfing on like
I
garbage.
Whenever I walk in my backyard, I see it as one large surfboard. I live in Southern California, so during the big one, it may create beachfront property for me, although I don't live at the beach now. I live many, many miles away.
You
So,
never
yeah,
know. Something to be hopeful for.
yeah. And every time we have an earthquake, I'm from the Midwest. I was born in Des Moines and raised in Minneapolis. Every time there's an earthquake, I don't know why, but I find it so fascinating. It doesn't scare me. I think it would scare me if I were in a 50-story building in downtown LA. But living in an old lath and plaster wood framed house, I don't think it's going to go too far. And to be standing on your floor or on the ground and have it begin to shift beneath you is a very interesting feeling.
Yeah, I usually sleep through most of the earthquakes we feel here in Vegas from you guys. So
And I think it's contributed to my philosophy of the end days, which I don't particularly think are coming that soon. But if and when they do come and I'm alive, I want to treat it like a surfboard.
Well, I think that's a great way to look at it. And for the fans out there, they really love this interview. I can tell based on our live chat. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Jackie.
And for anybody out there that missed any of this interview, don't fret. You can find it on the website within the next few days. So keep your eyes peeled to 918thefan.com and your ears tuned to 91.8 The Fan, where we play everything you want and nothing you don't.